So the third category of suffering is like that. So while mentioning the third category, the condition, as I already said, is the body, and not only body, the aggregates of the body. When our mind took the rebirth, and it aggregated like 5 aggregates. In English we can call it form. We took the body itself is form. So number 1, that is the condition, number 1 condition. Number 2 is the sensation or the faculty of feeling. And the number 3 is perception. Number 4 is the formation. So you took the formation. And number 4 is the consciousness. So when we say we are suffering from this form, like we have some accidents, we get some punishment or some beating, then there's the suffering for the form, and feeling and sensation is probably the biggest suffering. If you don't have feeling and sensation, then you cannot suffer too much. And also perception and formation, consciousness, all bring suffering. So they are like the pillars. When you have the pillar, you have the whole house. So when these are like the pillars, these are like the foundations. And regarding this suffering of truth, there is one saying in Tibetan, maybe you have heard or read about it. It said, in the needle point of samsara, there is never any happiness. Have you heard about this?
In the which point?
In the needle point of samsara, there is never any happiness. Needle point of needle. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, needle point is painful.
Yeah.
So it will never be happy to have needle on you. So it's like that. So you cannot find happiness over the needle point. And also the samsara is described as a pit of fire, an island of cannibals. So these are the explanation of samsara, how we can understand the samsara. So all our life in samsara, through this category, we can see that we are here not to achieve happiness. We are here to achieve sufferings only. But we can get rid of it. So that's when the second truth comes. If you need to get rid of the suffering, you want the freedom, then you need to go to the main teachings of Buddha. So here it's already explained the suffering. Suffering of its fruit, the fruit suffering, the conditioned suffering. The first 2 category is the suffering itself. The third one is the condition. So the cause of the truth is the second noble truth, and we call it cause of suffering. So we need to go through the cause of suffering. We need to think, we need to understand what is the cause of suffering. And why do we need to understand cause of suffering? Because if we don't find the cause, suffering will always happen. So, generally, desire is supposed to be the cause of suffering. Because even if we are in the existence as some human or some animal, and even if we have this body to suffer, but if we do not have the desire, if we do not desire, if we do not grasp, then we do not suffer much, or we can end the suffering in some way. For example, if we are satisfied with whatever happens to us, whatever we get, if we do not have the plan, do not have the task, if we do not want something, if we do not desire for something, then we have some suffering, but it's easy. But when we have desire, the real suffering comes, because what we desire to have something, and when we don't get that thing, we feel the suffering. And which we do not want, our death, our accidents, our difficult circumstances, all of this, we do not want them, but it happens because we have our karma, so it will happen. But even if it comes from our karma, if we welcome them with open mind, then it's easy, it's okay. But if we try to reject the fruit of our karma, then it's difficult. So, the desire. But again, if we try to go deeply, what is the root of the suffering? The deeper root of suffering is the clinging or the grasping of I or self. So, I have already, like earlier said, that when we have the feeling or the notion of I, then only suffering starts. If we do not have the notion of I, then there is no suffering. We have some experience, something is happening, but there is not suffering because there is no I. And because of this grasping of I, the notion of I, we keep doing more karma, more negative karma, which will bring us more suffering. So, the main idea here is to give up the notion of I. The main practice of Buddhism is also to give up the notion, give up the habit of feeling I. So, or we can say we need to realize the selflessness. So, that's the root of the suffering, and we can also explain it in another way, which is called ignorance. So the ignorance is of the notion or the feeling that this body is the self, body is I. So when we have this notion, when we have the belief of I, and when we are unable to realize our true nature of ourselves, then the suffering is always there. We feel the suffering, and we keep doing the karma to suffer, to bring more suffering. So, these two are the first two noble truths which we need to analyze correctly and then also understand as much as possible. Do you have some like question or something about first two?
No, it's okay.
Okay. You have also read about the
Yes.
Four Noble Truths, so you might not have question. Maybe you are
It's okay.
satisfied with
It's clear with your explanation in the book.
is not much different.
No, the examples are different. And some
Examples are only different,
examples are different.
but the meanings are same.
The meaning is fortunately.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I could be lost.
Yeah. Otherwise, you could be lost. Yeah.
That's okay. Well,
Yeah. And the third noble truth is the cessation of suffering, the end of suffering. So, how will the end of suffering happen? Like the good moments, the movie, the music, it ends. Even if we don't want it to end, it gets end. But the suffering, we want it to end, but we don't know how to end the suffering. It's kind of a puzzle. Because if you are unable to solve the puzzle becomes more difficult, more and more difficult. So it's not like simple like a movie which you don't need to try to end the movie, because if you watch the movie it will end. If you live a human life, it will end. You enjoy or you suffer, doesn't matter, you end your life. Because there is the end of your life coming soon. But the end of suffering does not happen. And I think the death, the intermediate state we talked about, which is beyond the death and the rebirth, so that is the biggest puzzle where all of us are tricked. We trick ourselves and we again enter into the samsara. That is the point of the cycle. Like we had some mala or some circle ring thing. So in the ring also, most of the rings, there is one point, there is like eye of the ring. So that ring is like, there is one stick, one single stick, one bar, and you make it round and you touch it and you maybe weld it, do the welding, then it becomes a ring. But here is small possibility to to get yourself free. But we trick ourselves. That is like a tendency of ourselves, because also already said in our previous class that we are driven by our karma, so we don't have a good idea or technique to free ourselves. We again enter inside that. So the tendency comes from our karma, which drives us, and we again enter into the samsara. And it's like the cycle or the bike. So it keeps rolling and rolling and rolling. Or anyway. So the third truth, we call it the truth of cessation or the ending. So firstly, we need to understand that there is the end. There is an end. If we can try, if we can work hard, if we can be disciplined, if we have perseverance, and if we enter into the proper way, or we can say we need to get into the route which leads us to the cessation or liberation. So like after this month you will return back to your country, France. But if you do not take or board on the plane for France, You take a plane for Japan, you sit in the plane for America, you sit in the plane for Thailand, then you don't reach your home. You reach some other place, other country. So we have previously said the different philosophy of Buddhism are also named as vehicle. So we need to ride the correct vehicle. Which vehicle will take us to the liberation? So these last two are the cessation of suffering and the path of suffering. So path is like the vehicle, and the nirvana. Nirvana is the root or the ultimate goal. So we need to recognize our goal, or we need to at least understand that there is the end of suffering. We can end the suffering. And generally, I think I can also, or I should also, explain about the, like Buddha's story. We say he attained nirvana in Kushinagar, he attained enlightenment in Bodh Gaya. So it's like the two different things if we go formally. But we need to understand that practically he achieved nirvana. Nirvana is same as enlightenment. He attained nirvana in Bodh Gaya while he attained Buddhahood. But there was this formality remaining, because he became Buddha, so practically he is free from suffering. But his body is still alive, so there is little bit of suffering, pain in the body. So in this way we can also call like half nirvana. So, like we know that suffering, we know the cause of suffering, we practice, and we are able to get rid of the cause of suffering. Then even if we are alive, we are experiencing like half nirvana, because we are already free, because our mind is not feeling the pain anymore. Our body might be feeling, but the body will be seized or deceased. Then we have like full freedom, full liberation. But until then, when we have already realized the truth, then we are already like half of our suffering is fully gone, but like our body is only suffering, our mind is not suffering. So that's why we need to understand that we can achieve nirvana while we are alive also. It's not like only when we die, then will the nirvana happen. And also the nirvana is why we need to achieve or attain nirvana. We need to get rid of suffering, and we need to experience the happiness. And that can happen while we are alive also. So fourth noble truth is the path of suffering, is the vehicle which we need to ride in order to reach our goal. And our goal is nirvana. And the path of the truth of path is also generally what Buddha has taught, and what we call it is the middle way. So the middle way is the path from which we can end our suffering, we can achieve happiness. And while talking about the middle way, generally or normally we need to distinguish the middle way from the two extremism. So we need to balance it. So if we go into the either of the extremism, then we are not into the middle way. The extremism, the true extremism also happens from the dualism, duality, the dual mind we say it. So the dual mind and the two kinds of extremism always is like the day and the night, white and black. So we always have this two dimension, like the two side of a coin. So we always have this two side, and like the previous partner of Buddha we already have mentioned, like they were practicing extremism, torturing themselves, having too much of pain for your body to achieve liberation. But even in that way also Buddha explained that it will not happen. If you keep enjoying having luxury, having too much of food, too much of relaxation, then also you will not experience the happiness. And if you also like torture yourself, make yourself hard and painful, then also it will not happen. It's like the first two truths, the truth of suffering and the cause, the suffering of change. It's like that. So you want either of this, but you don't want the balance. Then you cannot achieve happiness. So Buddha has shown the middle way, and to practice the middle way, we also need to understand the truth of path in full detail. And full detail is the eightfold path, or eightfold noble path, as we can say. So eightfold noble path, what's the time?
I don't know, but we're 15 minutes recording.
Okay. You don't have the mobile also?
It's 11.
11? 11 done?
Yeah.
Okay. So the eightfold path. Okay. Let's try. I might not remember the words immediately. Like number one is right view. So yeah, anyways, we can go through the right views firstly, because and generally right view is considered the view of Four Noble Truths itself. If you have Four Noble Truths, if you understand the Four Noble Truths, and if your view, your philosophy based on Four Noble Truths and other philosophy of Buddhism or the Dharma, then that's the right view. And generally we always need to have the right view. If we don't have the right view, we always do mistakes. So right view is also considered like the eye in the body. We have this whole body, we have this different faculty in our body, but if we don't have eye, then we can do nothing. We cannot do work, we cannot work anything. We cannot go somewhere. For that also we need eye. And also there are some philosophical, like Western philosophy studies, where like after they explained, I was able to realize that without our eyes, if we are blind from our birth, then even though we touch it, we cannot like recognize it properly. Like we have touched it thousands of times, but when we, like one day the doctor cures us, we see it, we cannot realize that it is the same thing I touched. It might be different. We are even unable to realize the shape of it.
It's like the elephant story.
Yeah.
The blind.
Yeah, it's almost like same. So, right view for Four Noble Truths, and if you get into the higher teachings of Buddhism, So all the philosophical part becomes the view. So if you don't have the right view, then like you cannot practice Buddhism if you do not know the Four Noble Truths. So the view of Four Noble Truths is like the eye or eyes. And the second one is the right aspiration also, and some call it as right thought. So even if we have right view or right even if we have right view, if we don't have the correct right thought, right aspirations, then again we fail, we go the wrong way. So we always have this also, not only aspiration and thought, is also called as right intention. So we need to have the right intention, right thought. Our minds should be always pure. If our mind is polluted, then everything will go wrong. Everything that happens will go wrong. And actually the first two, the right view and the right thought or aspiration, is the part of wisdom. So Eightfold Path is also categorized in three: wisdom, morality, and concentration. Concentration like meditation. That number three is concentration, or you can say a package of meditation. Number two is about morality, more discipline. And number one is wisdom. So if we don't consider like the Western concept or philosophy, if we only consider in our Asian way, then it's like the brain and the mind. So right view is like a brain, and the right, or we have said the eyes also, or brain also, and right thought is the mind. You should not get polluted or always keep it pure. And then the another three in the part of morality is number one is speech. So we should have right speech. And okay, so regarding right thought, right aspiration, I already said we need to make it pure, not get it polluted. But what is the pollution that can happen? Like when we go into the city of Kathmandu, the pollution is of dust and smoke. There are lots of smoke, lots of dust. In the same way, the impurity of the mind is like can be divided into many.